So the final Guardians of the Galaxy film has just been released in theatres, and for the most part, it's a satisfying ending for James Gunn's MCU outing. It has the trademark comedy of the previous films, but it combines this with a more emotional storyline to deliver a very dramatic ending for this franchise. In this video, I'm going to be giving you my spoiler-free review for Guardians of the Galaxy 3, discussing why I think it's a great ending to James Gunn's Marvel trilogy, but one that isn't without its faults too. Before I get into it though, if you want to see more videos on upcoming theatrical releases like Guardians 3, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating, subscribing to the channel, and turning on your notifications. But without further ado, let's dive into my review for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So superheroes on the big screen have had quite a patchy period as of late, and a lot of those movies have been connected to the MCU. Thor: Love and Thunder, Quantum Mania, and Multiverse of Madness have been installments that had potential, but failed to really live up to the standards that Marvel used to set. We've seen unfinished CGI, poor plotlines, and over-the-top humour combined to give us films and even shows that just exist to set up what's to come. But while James Gunn was really the one to push forward that trademark MCU tone that set the standard, he also is the one who continuously seems to make it unique, and does so in a way that achieves what this movie alone set out to do. And that is to provide a moving and satisfying finale for a franchise that was an unlikely success story from the beginning. Returning MCU fans know that nothing fully ends in this universe, and while characters die, villains lose, and storylines end or evolve, at the end of the day, they are all a part of a continuous machine that sets up the next thing. But James Gunn and the extended cast that are a part of this franchise have gone out and tried to give us the best conclusion to this Guardian story that they can, with a potent mix of action, story, humour, and emotional payoff. It is something that makes you further excited to see what Gunn does with his own cinematic universe over at DC, and it does show that the filmmaker can approach different tones in a comic book movie quite well, even if at times it does become quite jarring. Before we get to that conflicting tone though, it's key that I start by discussing the importance of the Guardians themselves and how this film really takes on a more emotional edge with those stories. On the surface, the film is a series of quests where the Guardians have to obtain certain objects and info that can solve their problems, but that is used as a structural backdrop for the story to explore each of their emotional centres. Volume 3 gives a good amount of screen time to each member of the team, whether it be Nebula's journey in gaining empathy, bringing the former machine's redemption to a great finish, and one that is in contrast to her sister's return, as she has a harder attitude by being a younger version of that character. There's also Drax and Mantis and their comedic friction, Peter Quill's problems with accepting that his once lover Gamora is no more, and then Groot with being the physical support that brings the family together. But the Guardian whose story really nails this added emotional telling is actually Rocket, who, as was seen in the trailer, is really put through a tormenting past. Rocket is basically the star of the show, and we learn that his story is heartbreaking and one of the most emotional stories told in Marvel films. James Gunn effectively focuses on a raccoon and his animal friends, and shows how the film's villain, the High Evolutionary, is behind the evolution and essentially the experiments on living creatures to make the perfect society. So with an emotional origin story for a wisecracking raccoon, the Guardians are now in a situation where they must race to save his life, and we as the audience see his dark past along the journey. Now, while all of the Guardians do a great job in their own ways, and the villains do serve the purpose of the plot to make you feel the weight that's put up against them, I will say that the critical point from a character perspective is again the villains, and that's something that I honestly thought was a weakness with the previous Guardians films as well. While the first Guardians film is one of my favourite MCU movies, my main criticism with that was with Ronan the Accuser's villain and how he was too over the top and not very memorable. And the same can be said about Adam Warlock and the High Evolutionary in the third film. They serve the purpose of the narrative, you can tell that the actors are trying in their roles to really convey a good performance, and I do respect that, but you do feel that they could have done more with them, especially with that of Adam Warlock. I was really looking forward to Poulter's performance, and I just felt that they misused that character. But as a whole, the Guardians are the focus of this, and they really nail their final outing with each of their characters' conclusive beats, and it also really shows that James Gunn knows how to work with a large ensemble. Coming now to the filmmaking and tone of the film, it's mainly a good mix of everything we love about Gunn's style, but then there are a few small issues in there too. On one side, there are the brilliant imaginative visuals, and it's definitely the most colourful, trippy, and even humorous of Gunn's offerings with his trilogy, making you further wonder if he can approach someone like Superman in a vastly distinct way. He himself has said that his Superman film will be vastly different in tone and approach, and from knowing him as a filmmaker that does put the effort in with all departments to create something different with each film too, that does give me the confidence that he can do something appropriate for a certain character. This installment also brings more of the practical to its makeup and world building as well, especially with that Counter-Earth location, and I respect that Gunn is able to bring what he did on the Suicide Squad film when it comes to added practicality. You can tell that Marvel have let a creative work their magic rather than get too involved, and that helps this film over some of the more mucky superhero MCU flicks in the last few years, which really felt factory produced. There's stupidly silly gags and lines that remind you of the filmmaker's comedy, there's action sequences that are also stunning, and some moments that use another great soundtrack to play on repeat afterwards. Gunn adds a darker and emotional sensibility to all of this, as spoke about before, and while he does a mostly great job of balancing those differing tones, I will say that at times it does feel off-putting, and it's as if Gunn and his crew threw everything at the screen, knowing that this would be the end. However, the ending of this film does deliver when it comes to all of these tonal beats in a similar way to Volume 2 and everything we saw there, and it shows that the director knows how to build towards a satisfying outcome for his central characters. It's bittersweet and makes up for some of the tonal problems that stem throughout. So after a disappointing Phase 4 in the MCU on both the big screen and the small screen, and a really underwhelming start to Phase 5 with Quantumania, Gunn has delivered the goods in his final MCU film, and done so in a way that shows that lessons can be learnt from the issues of the past. There should be more time taken to craft a project and make it look and sound as good as possible, and the film should be led by a sense of heart and have a well-written dramatic storyline that does something we haven't seen before. This film shows that the MCU can work much better when a creative filmmaker is given the room to bring their vision to life, rather than have a filmmaker carry out a project that you fully dictate and use as a stepping stone to get to the next installment. They've got to focus on individual storytelling before they can ramp up the universe teases and nostalgia to the max, especially if there's loads of new characters coming in before those planned Avengers films. At the minute, I'm not too excited about those because the writers haven't had the greatest track record in the MCU, whereas someone like James Gunn is fresh off multiple films that have gone down well, both for Marvel and DC, and his vision has been retained through all of that. Even after a trilogy of films in the Guardians saga, he has somehow managed to make each of them feel different in their own ways, and the consistent ambition and heart that he brings every time will be truly missed in this cinematic universe. It's a great send-off for this group of iconic characters, and it's the most well put together MCU film in a good while. But that was my spoiler-free review for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Overall, it's a solid conclusion to the Guardians story, and I think that Gunn has done a great job of rounding out his trilogy on its own merits. I'm still not confident for the future of the MCU yet, because Gunn has now left to start his universe at DC, and the projects coming up could be more of what we've seen recently, where one movie sets up the ones that follow. While I can't say whether this will be the case once again, we've just seen it so much from Marvel outside of the Russo brothers and filmmakers like James Gunn since Endgame, and it becomes quite an uninspired landscape. Still, as always, I'll give them a chance, and Guardians 3 is, for me, a small win for the studio, so there's definitely hope that better films could always come. I'm giving Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 a rating of 8 out of 10. But to those who have already seen the film, what do you think of the final Guardians movie from James Gunn, and do you agree that it's a great ending for his MCU trilogy? Let me know down below in the comment section. For more videos surrounding the latest comic book movie releases, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.